Today, I am going to be installing these vintage style Kluson tuners into this Warmoth Hombre neck, so stick around. Hey everybody, it is Aaron from Warmoth, and if you watched my video last week, you already know about the limited run black gold, aka Texas T sets that Warmoth is going to be releasing. And this neck here is the neck from the prototype set that I am going to be assembling starting in this video and the next couple ones. And what I'm going to do today is install this set of vintage style Kluson tuners in it. I'm not always the biggest fan of vintage style tuners because they use bushings that have to be held in by friction, and I just think there's lots of better modern alternatives that aren't so wonky to install. But if you want the vintage look, you have to go with the vintage style tuners that have the bushings, and that's the case in this one. We want it to have a cool vintage look. So I'm going to be installing these today, and I'm going to take you along for the journey. So let's get started. So here's the neck, obviously, and here is the first bushing. And you'll notice immediately as you try to fit it in that it is too big. It does not easily fit in the tuner ream, and that's fairly typical. These have to have a certain amount of tension to go in there and stay in there. But if you try to hammer that thing in the way it is now, you're going to split your headstock. It's like driving a wedge into a piece of lumber. So we have to enlarge this tuner ream enough for this bushing to fit in there with some tension to hold it in place, but not so much tension that you end up splitting your headstock. And to do that, you use this handy little gadget right here. This is called a tapered reamer, and you can get these, I don't know, for 15 bucks on Amazon or something. And these come in really handy when you need to enlarge a ream just enough to get something to fit. For example, I use it all the time when I'm installing like volume or tone pots on a rear-mounted guitar, and the hole isn't quite big enough. You can just use this to slightly enlarge the hole, and that's what we're going to do here. And you want to start out slow so you don't chip any of the paint, and then you just want to go slow and check your progress as you proceed. Now this is a tilt back headstock, obviously, so I've got it sitting on this little cradle here that kind of puts it in an angle where the headstock surface is parallel, not quite parallel, but close enough. And I'm going to hold it here with this hand while I use the tapered reamer to enlarge these holes, and I'll just check as I go to make sure that this bushing fits. So let's give it a shot. And you can see right away that the first thing I'm taking off is the paint. Got to get through that layer of paint and get down to the raw wood. I doubt that's even close yet. Nope, not really. But you just want to go slow, checking your progress often, because obviously if you ream this hole out too big, then you've got a problem. So you just go slow. Getting closer. I usually like to keep going until the bushing drops about halfway down in, and we're not even close yet. So let's keep going. All right, so it's dropping down in a little bit. Still not where I like it to be though. But you should be able to see now that I've gone through the paint, and you can start to see the raw wood underneath there. Starting to drop down a little further, but still not enough. A little bit further still. And then of course, once I've done this first one, I'll have to go do the other 5 in a similar fashion. I won't make you sit through the entire time that it takes me to do that. I'll speed it up for you and play a delightful music soundtrack to keep you entertained. Getting much closer. I think maybe 1 or 2 more passes with the reamer and we will be there. Another thing that I would love to use the tapered reamer for, but I can't, is when you're installing string ferrules on the back of for example, a telly replacement body. But the tapered reamer doesn't work in that scenario because the tapered reamer has to pass all the way through the hole, and that doesn't work on the body. But the tapered reamer works fantastic in cases like this, and also when you're trying to enlarge holes for volume and tone pots. Alright, so that's dropping about halfway down in there now. That's pretty close to where I like it. So I'm going to go ahead and finish off the rest of these really quick. Okay, and so now all of these are reamed so that the bushings fall almost all the way down in there, maybe 3/4 of the way down in there. And then you just use a little bit of screw wax, or I like to use this product called Slip Stick by Wilkinson. It's the same thing, you just want to give it a little bit of lubrication so that it falls in there easier. And you should be able to press them most of the way in, like so. So they are mostly pressed in now, mostly pressed all the way in. If they need to go a little further, I just give them a little tap with my fret hammer. Obviously you want to move the headstock so that it is flat up against something. You don't want to hold it up in the air like this and start hammering on it. So you just move it so that it's flat and give it a couple little taps. And there we have it. The tuner bushings are now in place. Oh, this one needs to go down a little bit further. Alright, so I've now got all the bushings installed. It's time to actually install the tuners themselves. So I'm going to grab these Klusons and stick them in there. You can see I've already put tape down there. That's to, because this neck is black, I want to be able to have a lighter surface where I can make a mark indicating where the mounting screws should go. So I'm just going to drop these tuners in there like so. And by the way, when you're putting on these vintage Klusons, you always want to make sure that the little shaft that attaches to the tuner button is on this end of the tuner. You don't want to put it like that. It needs to be like that. So once you're sure that you've got them on the correct side, you can just go ahead and drop them all in. And with these vintage ones that come to a point, I haven't found like a surefire way to do it. I always just kind of eyeball it, because they generally go point to point, but these ones on the outermost position always angle just a little bit. So I just kind of eyeball it, and then I'm going to use a Sharpie to make a little dot where the mounting screw should go. And then once I'm done, I should be able to just pop the tuners out, and all my little dots will make it very easy to know where to drill. Just like so. Now, as far as drilling goes, you want to make sure that you have the correct drill bit by using a millimeter gauge to check the inner and outer diameter of this screw. I've got a whole video that I've done on this, so I'll link to it in the description, but if you're uncertain, make sure you go check out that video. So what you want to do is take the mounting screw, drop it through the tuning machine, and this amount that's left over here is how much, that'll be the total depth of the screw, and then you put a little piece of tape where that is so that you don't over drill, because you definitely do not want to drill through your headstock. And then the other little piece of advice I would give is to to use a little awl or a punch like this one that I have here, to put a little indentation mark where you're going to drill. That'll help keep the drill bit from wandering. So I'm going to go ahead and make a little punch in the center of each of these circles. All right, so there's that. Now I'm going to use my my little neck support here to put the neck at a better angle for drilling these holes. And we'll see how this goes. And again, I'm going to use slipstick to lube up every screw before I drive it into the wood. One thing I like to do is use these little handheld mini screwdrivers. If you use a giant screwdriver to drive these screws like this, it's way too easy to reef harder than you should and potentially break a screw. If you can't drive it with this, then you need to enlarge the hole that you drilled. But you can see that I can easily drive that screw with this little mini screwdriver. So that tells me that the holes are the correct size. And there we have it. Vintage Kluson tuners installed successfully. And now, since I'm here working on the headstock anyway, I am going to go ahead and install the truss rod cover. I don't know if you can see this, but the end of the truss rod cover is cut perfectly flat. But of course the headstock is angled, so when you put it up against the nut, there is a tiny little gap right there. So I don't know if you can see that little gap right there. It's kind of small. Maybe if I turn it this way. Can you see that gap right there? I don't know. But it's enough to bother me. So what I'm going to do is try and sand an angle onto the end of this truss rod cover, like a reverse angle. Right, like right now it's flat. I'm going to try and sand a reverse angle so that when it butts up against the nut right there, it has a little nicer fit. So I have borrowed a cutting board from the kitchen and some 150 grit sandpaper, and I'm just going to do this by hand and see how it goes. That is already looking much nicer. Again, I don't know if you can see that, but the top of it is a much tighter fit. I think maybe if I sand it just a little more, I can get it even a little bit better. Oh yeah, that looks so much nicer. All right, so let me grab some tape and I will tape that into position and drill the holes to mount it. Okay, I got my mounting screws, I got my slip stick, I got my truss rod cover, and my mini screwdriver. And you can see, just as I did with the tuners, I put a little piece of masking tape there so I can mark where these mounting holes are going to need to be drilled. Very nice. There we have our completed headstock. It's a little dusty. I'll clean that up later. But we have the Klusons mounted. We've got the truss rod cover mounted, and starting to see what this thing is going to look like. All right, and that is it for this Warmoth Hombre neck. We got the bushings installed, we got the Kluson vintage style tuners mounted, and we got the truss rod cover mounted. It is ready to be attached to the body so that we can continue with the build, and I will do that in the next video. In the meantime, if you have any questions about Hombre necks, make sure and visit the Warmoth website, or you can give our customer service reps a call. And until next time, keep on picking.